Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2. Shh. Okay. Welcome to the Parsha class 5785, Parshat Pekudei. Beautiful Parsha, the end of Sefer Shemot, Chazak, Chazak, we need Chazek. There's a lot to learn, even though Pekudei seems repetitive of things that have already been mentioned. The instructions for building of the Big Day Kahuna, the clothing of the Kahuna, and then some reiterations regarding the building of the Mishkan. And finally, the actual setting it up and getting it started in preparation for next week's Parsha of Vayikra, when we get into the Korbanot and the use of the Mishkan for its ultimate purpose of inspiring the Jewish people to follow in the ways of H-Shem. With that said, we're going to go straight into, there's quite a bit to say, as I said, so that we're going to get right into the source sheet that was sent out earlier. There we go. Earlier yesterday, I believe. Yeah, should have been yesterday. And if you don't have the link, let me know. This first source is something we haven't quoted much before, if at all. So let's, without any further ado, let's get right into. One moment. Let's get right into the parsha. Okay, so we have. So we have in the beginning of the parsha, very first verse. It's the parsha is called Pekudei or Fekudei, as it's called in the verse says. Pekudei means an accounting, a let's see, a basically a summary sheet of how the materials were used by Moshe in creating the clothing of the Kohanim and the Mishkan itself. So it goes into quite some detail. But the first verse says, "Ele Pekudei HaMishkan, Mishkan HaEdut, Asher Pukad Al Pi Moshe, Avodat HaLeviim, Biyad Itamar Ben Aharon HaKohen." So this is the Pekudei, this is the counting of the Mishkan. Which Mishkan, in case you didn't know, the Mishkan of the Edut, of the promise. Asher Pukad Al Pi Moshe, the accounting was done by Moshe. It was supervised by him. It was the work of the Leviim, Avodat HaLeviim, who were led by somebody by the name of Itamar ben Aaron HaKohen. So one of the sons of Aaron, Itamar, basically led this whole counting business. Now, a trained accountant, probably not. So the question that many commentaries deal with, and we've dealt with it in the past, is why does there need to be an accounting at all? Did they not trust Moshe? Did they ask for accountings in other situations? We don't have too many pekudim in the Torah. This is very unique that every single piece of linen and silver and everything has to be accounted for, and there might be a reason for this. So we're going to quote from a source we don't usually quote from, but it's on the Midrash. And it doesn't say, the Midrash doesn't always say what its point is. The Midrash sometimes quotes a story or a parable or some other verse in all of Tanakh to sort of give us some sort of insight into a verse or an idea in the Parsha. And this particular, there's a Midrash, in Midrash Rabbah 80, in case you want to look it up. In Pekudei, in Parsha Pekudei, yeah, where it says there, it says a story about Imaseh Rabbi Shimon ben Chalafta. Story about this Rabbi Shimon ben Chalafta, famous story. Many people know it. Shabbat, Erev Shabbat, it came. Erev Shabbat was imminent. It's a time for Shabbat. Lo haya lo man lahid parnes. He did not have anything to eat. There was no food, so he was sent out. Yatsa lo chutz min ha'ir. He went out to the. He went out of the city. Mitpalel lifnei Elokim, and he prayed in front of. He prayed before Hashem. God, please give me something. I'm my home, my family. They're suffering. They need to eat for Shabbat. Minitan lo even tuva min hashamayim. He was given in heaven, from heaven. He was a stone fell from heaven into his hands, a very precious stone. Natna le shulchani. She brought it to his table. Ufanes ota Shabbat, and with that they were able to. No, took it to shulchani, to an exchanger, to a pawn shop. He pawned the stone, right? And he was able to feed his family for Shabbat. Amra ishto mehechan elu. And his wife asked, where did you get this stone? Amar Allah, he said to her, Mema shefarnes hakadosh baruch hu. Hashem himself paid me with the stone. Amra, she said to him, Im ein ata omer li mehechan hein. If you won't tell me where it's from, eini mu'etet klum. We're not going to use it at all. Okay, so now we have to use it. So what are we going to do? He has to tell her. So he went and he told her, Amar la kach nitpalalti. I prayed l'fnei ha'elokim. I prayed before Hashem. V'nitin li min hashamayim. He gave this to me from Shemaim. Told her the whole story, true story. Amar lo. She said to him, Eini to emet klum. We're not going to use it at all. Huh? I just told you the story. We're still not going to use it. So ad shetamar li shetchira motzei Shabbat. We'll deal with this after Shabbat. Omar la lama, why? He said, she said basically she wants him to return it after Shabbat. He says, why? Amar lo, she said to him, Ata rotze sheyeh shulchanam chaser shulchan chaveracha male. You want our table, your table, our table to be empty and for your friends' tables to be full? That's what she says to him. So halach Reb Shimon Hodia Masad el Rebbe. He went to his Rebbe Rabbi Huda Hanasi, the author of the Mishnah. He said he went to him with his wife's complaint, and he says Amar lo lech amor lo im shulchan chaser ani im mlatzim mishalia. He listens. His Rabbi Huda listens. He says, strokes his beard and says, you know what? Maybe she's right that you'll lose something in your table. But tell her from me that if you're missing anything at your table, I will fill it up. He went and told her. Amrlo, she said to him, Lech imi lemi shelamadcha Torah. Listen to me, I'm going to teach you some Torah, his wife says to him. Right? Amra lo Rebbe. So he says this to Rebbe. Ki roa adam lechavero leolam haba. Will a person see another person in the world to come? We're going to get to understanding the story in just a moment. Relax. Lo kol tzadik v'tzadik haya lo ulam atzmo. Isn't every tzaddik, every righteous person in heaven, don't they have their own little world where they don't know about other worlds, other people's situations in heaven? Right? Shneimar, because it says in a verse in Kohelet, right? There's a verse there that says, Ki holech ha'adam al beit olamo. A person goes to the house of his world. Olamim ain't clear. It doesn't say to the worlds. He only sees his olamo, his own world. Right? Kan ela olamo. Kevan shishama kain. Once Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi heard this from the wife of his student, he says halach v'hazir adkan. So he went in. So what? Sorry, take that back. All right. Um, right. So he went and uh, then when Shimon ben Chalafta heard this from his own wife, he went and returned the stone. Very strange story, and definitely worthy of some commentary. Let's begin with this very important point. Yeah, um, very important. We're going to look now. This is a very long essay, so I'm just going to summarize it for you. This is Kochve Or, written by Rav Yitzchak Blazer, also known as Rav Yitzchak Peterberger, one of the main students of Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, one of the proponents of the Musar movement, one of the people who really made it happen. So he writes a very important point. So let's explain this midrash first of all. So he explains like this. This midrash is talking about this poor Talmud scholar, right, Shimon ben Chalafta, and the fact that he was willing to receive a reward from heaven that would feed him in this world. His wife said, our table, which table? Our heavenly table, the table that we are going to get in the world to come. That table will not be as full as your colleagues' tables. Everybody has, and this is what we'll get to that in a moment. Your table will not be as full as your colleagues' tables. So he says, okay, what am I going to do? So she said, go to your Rebbe. He went to his Rebbe, and his Rebbe said, she's right. Your table won't be as full. You took some of your heavenly reward in this world. And so your table won't be as full. But it's okay. I'll give you some of mine in heaven. And his wife responded, told him to tell his Rebbe, is that true? Is that even possible? Can you share your stuff with us? You can't. Because in heaven, you get yours, we get ours, and there's a wall in between. You're not even going to know what we have, what we don't have. That's what it seems like this midrash is saying. But Rav Yitzchak Blazer wants to say something, and then of course he returns the stone, meaning he'd rather suffer in this world and then receive his great reward and a full table, whatever that means, in the world to come. This is all, of course, metaphorical. There's no tables, there's no walls, etc. It's just we're speaking in a language we simpletons can understand. So Rav Yitzchak Blazer explains a little bit deeper, and that's what this whole essay is right here. He points out, first of all, that obviously this holy wife of Rav Shimon ben Chalafta, she knew stuff, right? And she was right. What was she right about? So he goes on to say, first of all, you need to know that Pirkei Avot tells us, in Perek that Bufum Tzara Agra, we have this idea that according to our level of difficulty, that's how much reward we're going to get. Obviously, we don't do it for the reward, but we need to know there is a reward. There's an ultimate reward, either in this world or in the next, or actually in both, in a lot of ways. But that's aside the point. The important thing for us to know at this point is that there is a reward, and the reward Hashem gives us is based on how difficult something is for us. So, for example, take an example. In the world of medicine, right? An apple a day keeps the doctor away. So we know fruit is healthy to eat. If somebody has no problem eating fruit, right? No problem eating fruit, then they're gonna eat fruit and be healthy. One moment. Excuse me. Speaking of which, on the other hand, somebody who has trouble eating food has to like stuff it down his throat, right? So that person is going to be forced perhaps to eat an apple, and it'll that way be healthy. And in the physical world, like in the medical world, like we just mentioned, it makes no difference whether you struggle to take down the apple or not. You get the health benefits of the apple either way. In the spiritual world, things are different. If a mitzvah is difficult for you, take, for example, mitzvah of Shabbat, all the mitzvot of Shabbat. For some people, it's a cinch. It's lovely. It's beautiful. They can't wait for Shabbat. And so they get the reward for Shabbat easily. If somebody has to struggle, if somebody like in 100 years ago when people had to like lose their jobs every single week in order to keep Shabbat, so that person gets a higher reward for keeping Shabbat. And that's how Hashem runs the world in general. So this Reb Shimon ben Chalafta, he studied Torah with difficulty and with pain and with suffering and with poverty. Let's call it what it is. And when his Rebbe Yehuda Hanasi, offered to give him from his own table, from his own unique reward, because as we see, there's a unique reward for everybody. So Rav Shimon ben Halafta's wife said, is his table going to help us with our table? Our table is different. Our table is based on difficulty, of suffering, of poverty. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi was not suffering like that. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi lived in a lap of luxury. There's Gemaras after Gemaras of talking about how much Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi had on his table. He had all the fruits year round. He was not poor. He did not suffer for Torah. He was a Nasi. He was involved with the bigwigs, with the nobles of Rome, etc. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi had no financial issues. So yes, he got reward. Don't get me, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. I don't have to tell you what kind of reward he had, right? That he still has when we learn his Torah every single morning, right? So his reward is infinite, unimaginable, but it can't replace, it can't substitute for something missing on Rabbi Shimon ben Chalafta's table. It can't replace his unique reward. And the reason that this midrash is here then, the reason that this midrash is in Parsha Pekudei, our Parsha, and the reason we're bringing it up now is because that's why there has to be a Pekudei. That's why there has to be an accounting, because everybody gave what they could give, and everybody gave of themselves. And we're going to see later on in just a few, by the end of the class today, God willing, we're going to see that there's a very unique reward for somebody who can give of themselves in such a way. The person who donated the tapestries, if it was difficult for that person to give the tapestries, as opposed to the person who gave the silver, maybe it was easy for the person to give the silver. There's a pekudei, there is a cheshbon, there is an accounting done in Shemayim, not by us. We can't judge for whom one thing is difficult, for whom something is easy. Hashem knows, and Hashem rewards a person based on that. So that's how I wanted to start the class. And of course, I have the entire essay here in the source sheet for if you have a chance to look through it. It is, like I said, quite long, but it's beautiful, and he brings many other proofs and describes in much better detail, much more than I could say in this short time. But definitely worth your attention if you get a chance to look at that over Shabbat. Print this out, whatever you do. Okay, let's keep going. Next verse says, "Ubetzalel ben Uri ben Hur lemata Yehuda asa et kol asher tziva Hashem et Moshe." And Betzalel, the son of Uri, the son of Hur, from the tribe of Yehuda, made everything that Hashem commanded Moshe. Interesting. And what's interesting? We'll see. Rashi points out, Asher tziva Moshe ein ktiv kan. It doesn't say what Hashem, what Moshe commanded him. It says what Hashem commanded Moshe. There's a famous midrash that the Rashi is about to quote regarding this entire incident. It says here, and we brought up this midrash before in the past, but not exactly in this context. All right. Anyway, we'll see. Ela kol asher tziva Hashem et Moshe. It says that he did everything that that Hashem commanded Moshe, not what Moshe commanded him. Moshe's kind of being cut out here, in a sense, in the order of operations. So why is it cutting Moshe out? Afilu devarim shelo amar lo rabo. He even did things that his Rebbe Moshe didn't tell him, but that Hashem commanded Moshe. Usmicha dato l'masha amar l'Moshe misinai, and he somehow knew what Moshe was commanded at Sinai. In other words, by Hashem. Ki Moshe tziva leBetzalel la'asot tchila kelim achar kach Mishkan. Moshe commanded Betzalel to first make the vessels and then make the Mishkan, as we see in the Parshiot. Amar lo Betzalel. Betzalel answered him, Minhag olam la'asot tchila bayit v'achar kach meisim kelim b'tocho. What are you talking about? I'm going to make the vessels, the aron, the menorah, the shulchan, and this and that, and I'm going to just leave it outside and then make the Mishkan? That's not how the world works, Moshe Rabbeinu. First, we make the house, and then you make the furniture inside the house. You put up the interior after you put it on the exterior. That's the way of the world. Amar lo, so Moshe heard this and said, Kach shamati mipi HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I heard that from Hashem. You're right. That's what I heard from Hashem. Amar lo Moshe, Betzalel Kel Hayita. You are Betzalel Kel. You are, and it's a play on words on his name, Betzalel. Betzalel in the shadow of Kel, of Hashem. Hayita. You must have been hiding, you must have been a fly on the wall when Hashem was talking to me. You were mechaven, you understood what Hashem really wanted, as if you heard the command. Ki bavadai kach tziva li HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's exactly what Hashem commanded me. V'chein asa hamishkan tchila v'achar kach asa hakelim. First make the Mishkan and then make the kelim. You're right. So it sounds from this midrash, and that's how it's the simple explanation for sure, seems to be that Moshe messed up in his instructions. Hashem told him to make the Mishkan first and then to make the vessels. And when Moshe commanded this to Betzalel, he commanded it vice versa. He said, make the vessels first and then make the Mishkan, which is weird and certainly not what you would expect from Moshe Rabbeinu. So in an old sefer from the 1500s called Maseh Hashem, written by a doctor by the Harofe, he was called Harofe, Rav Eliezer Ashkenazi, right? I believe he was writing in Italy, if I'm not mistaken. Do I have a source here? Not immediately available. All right, so in Maseh Hashem, so he has this whole incident. It's kind of hard to read. I did not have the book present, so I had to use Hebrew Books, the Hebrew Books website, and I found a very, very 200-year-old edition that I that I had to scan or that was scanned that I took a picture of here. Either way, so what he says, what Rav Ashkenazi says is like this. What does it mean when Moshe tells Betzalel, that's what I heard? Does it mean like the way I kind of implied that Moshe was like, oh, sorry, yeah, that's what I meant. He said it backwards, but that's not how he meant it. Is that what it means? So he writes that the way Hashem told him to make it is to make the vessels first. Exactly how Moshe told Betzalel. But when Hashem told Moshe that to tell Betzalel to do the work, he knew, as you would expect, that he is somebody that's l'chashav chashbonot, that he's able to make calculations, that he's able to understand the thoughts of Hashem, that he is indeed Betzalel Kel. Obviously, everything that is built has to be built precisely and with some sort of, obviously, calculation and figuring out where things should go. as he quotes here. Um, כוונתו שיהיה חשב תחילה על הכלים קודם שיעשה המשכן, אבל בצלאל חשב שמשה אומר לו שיעשה בפועל בכלים קודם, לכן אמר מנהג העולם לעשות תחילה בית ואחר כך מעשים בגן התוכו על זה היטיב לו משה, and then כך שמעתי. So he says here that when he said that this is what I heard, mipiv shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, from Hashem, what it means is that he knew that Betzalel would be thinking and trying to figure out in his mind, how am I going to do this? Where should everything go? And when Moshe was told this whole idea of sof ma'aseh b'machshava tchila, this concept that before an action is started, the conclusion needs to be considered. Where's it going to go? What's the end result going to look like? Only after that can builders start working on what's the shape, what's the size, is it going to go through the door, what's the size of the door, all of these things. And that's why he had to be commanded to make the kelim first. Not because the kelim had to be made first, but because you have to think about how the kelim are going to be made before you make the thing that it's going to go into, so that it fits into the thing you're going to make for it to go into. Betzalel not that Moshe misunderstood Hashem, like we understood originally. Betzalel misunderstood Moshe. And he thought Moshe meant build the vessels first and then build the Mishkan. Because Hashem didn't tell Moshe to tell him otherwise. And Moshe said, exactly, yes, that's what Hashem told me. That's why we picked you. That's why Hashem told me to pick you. Because he knew that you would, in your mind, think, vessels, doorways. Where are they going to fit? What's the size? All of this. So that's why I commanded you the vessels first, so that you could imagine the Mishkan after you could imagine the vessels. But of course, make the Mishkan first, and then make the vessels and put them in there. So that's the Masa Hashem's interpretation of this whole incident. And now he understands that Moshe was obviously not mistaken about what he heard from Hashem, because really, and this is probably a very harsh statement to make, but worth saying, if Moshe messed this up, what else did he mess up? Chas v'shalom. So no, he didn't mess this up. He got this right. He got all of the Torah right, and that's the Torah we have today. And so what we have to understand is we have to figure out how to understand these midrashim that seem to imply that Moshe might have made a mistake. It's not he made a mistake. It's the other way around. All right, so we're going to look at a couple of more ideas that we have time for. We're halfway through the class. Let's get rocking and rolling, shall we? All right. Let's talk about the me'il. The me'il is a robe worn by the Kohen Gadol, and on the bottom of it, as we'll see, there were pomegranates and bells. Pamon v'rimon. And that's what our verse here says. This is chapter 39, verses 25 and 26. V'yasa pamoneh zahav tahor. You make these bells out of gold, pure gold. V'yitnu al pamonim b'toch rimonim. And you make, I don't know how we're going to translate this. We're going to do our best here. And you're going to place the bells amongst the pomegranates. There's pomegranates and bells, these different shapes on the bottom of this robe. Very beautiful, very decorative, but also probably very loud. Al shule ha'me'il saviv betoch harimon. Although I believe the Abarbanel, I think, or was it the Alshach, writes that it was gold because gold is the softest of metals, so it wasn't so loud. But whatever it was probably heavy. I'll tell you that much. The it probably weighed on the shoulders, but there were other things weighing on his shoulders too. Anyway, so it definitely seems that these bells and these pomegranates seems like one is inside the other. We'll get back to that in a moment. And then, of course, next verse 26, Pamon Vrimon, Pamon Vrimon. That's the bell, the pomegranate bell, pomegranate. And from this, it seems that they're alternating. So one bell, one pomegranate, one bell, one pomegranate, etc. In that sort of order. Al Shulei Hami'il on the bottom of the hem of this robe, Saviv all around the Sharit Kasher Tziva Hashem et Moshe. This was used for the service, and just like Hashem commanded Moshe. This is a phrase that's used very often in the parsha, according to Balaturim, 18 times in total, maybe even 19. There's this phrase that just as Hashem commanded Moshe. Earlier, remember, this is a repetition of the instructions. So way back, 10 chapters earlier, in chapter 28, verse 34, Rashi there says, but Pamon Zahav Rimon, Etzlo. It makes it very clear that it's next to it. It's aside from it. They're alternating. Like I said, bell, pomegranate, bell, pomegranate, bell, pomegranate. Which is different than how the Ramban understands it. The Ramban, writing from Spain, Rashi, remember, was from France, about 900 years ago. The Ramban is writing from Spain about 800 years ago, about 100 years later. And so he writes in the middle of his commentary about the Me'il, he writes, Lo yadati gam ken. He disagreed with some of the ideas of the Me'il that Rashi wrote about earlier. We're going to skip that for now. You can definitely go back to this commentary if you want. This is on this is his commentary on chapter 28, verse 31. So we're kind of going backwards here, but you'll see why in a moment. All right. Lama asa harav. That's, I don't know why the rabbi, meaning Rashi, pamonim la'atzmam pamon ben shnei rimonim. I don't know why he wants to envision the bells being by themselves and a bell between two pomegranates. Again, this alternating pattern. Ki im ken lo hayu harimonim mishmashim klum. The pomegranates wouldn't be touching each other at all. Why? They serve no purpose. There's bells making the noise, and these pomegranates are just useless. V'im l'noi, and they're just for decoration. Lama ayu suim b'karimon chalulim. What's the point of making these hollow pomegranates? Yasem kamin tefuche zahav. He could have made them golden apples. Why do they have to be rimonim? What's the point of it being pomegranate shaped? And according to Rashi, he should have said that this was going to hang like a bell, and they would ring when they would. But he doesn't say any of that. So what was the purpose of these? What was the purpose of these rimonim? So it says aval hem betochan mamash. They were inside them completely. They were literally inside them. In other words, the bells were inside the pomegranates. It wasn't alternating bell pomegranate bell pomegranate. It was bell pomegranate was one thing, a pomegranate bell. And then the next thing was another pomegranate bell, a bell inside of a pomegranate. That's the way the Ramban understands it. He says, "Ki harimonim chalulim." These, as he said, these rimonim, these pomegranates were empty, were hollow. V'asuim kamin rimonim katanim shelo pitche pihem. He says as if he made them like pomegranates that were small and with these closed mouths. And by the way, he's quoting here the Gemara in Zvachim. And the bells were closed inside them, and they would be and they were barely visible inside. So, in other words, there's two opinions, Rashi and Ramban, not small fries here, right? One says that it was alternating pattern of bell and pomegranate and bell and pomegranate. The other one says that no, it was uh, these pomegranates had the bells inside, and there was just pomegranate, pomegranate, pomegranate from the outside, and then inside you'd see these little bells hanging out from inside of them. And so we have to figure out what's the symbolism either way. So on this week's parsha, that's why we're bringing it up. The Chatam Sofer, in his classic way, makes a drasha, teaches us a lesson about this one way or the other. What would be the difference? What would be the difference? Okay. Um, so to understand what's happening here. There we go. All right. First, you need to know. We're going to try to say this outside, then we'll look inside if we can, if time permits. He brings from the Gemara in Orachin that the whole idea of this me'il, of these bells and everything, was to, we're on the second to last line here in the middle. Shemechaper al lashon hara. There's a sin called lashon hara, of speaking evil, and somehow this clothing was supposed to cleanse us of that particular sin. Obviously, a person has to do tshuva. Clothes by themselves don't do anything, but they inspired tshuva. Let's call it that, for lack of a better word. So the question is, right? Which is it? Which shape? Was it this alternating pomegranate bell, or was it with the pomegranates with the bell inside? So he says, "V'itnu al ponim b'toch harimonim." For that phrase that we said before, "V'yitnu et hapamonim b'toch harimonim," and I told you it's difficulty translating it. The way Rashi kind of has to be forced to translate it is that the bells were amongst b'toch, which means really inside. But he has to say that they're amongst. So, but the Chatam Sofer says mizeh, from this wording, mistai Ramban the Farish. It's kind of sounds like what the Ramban said, that the bells were inside the pomegranates. She'apomanei b'toch harimonim mamash. Look at Pirush Rashi, not like Rashi bein harimonim amnam mikra lachar Messiah lefirish marshi lachar palmon v'rimon. But the next verse where it says pomegranate bell, it sounds like it's describing this alternating pattern. So which is it? Is it like Rashi alternating, or is it like Ramban with the bell inside the pomegranate? So he says Lule could be. Based on the idea that we just said, that the lashon hara, the sin of evil speech, is what this is all about somehow. It could be that we're talking about two different kinds of evil speech, and that both are right. What does that mean? So it could be there's different kinds of lashon hara. First is speaking about others, right? You're just gossiping, you're making up stories, even if they're true stories. You're just spreading rumors, spreading true things, but embarrassing things, still spreading. Still lashon hara. And that could be symbolized by these bells that are by themselves just making a lot of noise, just jangling around next to these rimonim, surrounded by these rimonim, by these holy Jews, right? These pomegranates filled with mitzvot, right? These holy golden pomegranates. There's all these bells making a lot of noise about them. So that's lashon hara. But there's also lashon hara says the Chatam Sofer. This has nothing to do with your chavero, has nothing to do with your friend, but has to do with yourself. Where you're talking about yourself as if you're better than someone else. It's also one of the causes for people to speak Lashon Hara to begin with. This whole self-esteem business, where people think that that they're better than others because they could do better, they've done better, whatever they think, right? So we have to remember that these bells that are inside the pomegranates refers to our fellow Jews who are so filled with mitzvot, and they have to, even though they're holy and they're great, some of them like to make a lot of noise about these great things that they do. We recently talked about the idea in last week's parsha. Actually, we talked about the idea of sort of publicizing mitzvot that you do. It's a famous question whether you can at all. And we said that the halacha is that if you're doing it for self-aggrandizement, so you shouldn't. But if you want to advertise that you're doing a certain mitzvah for the purpose of inspiring others to do it, we've had people in the past, for instance, sponsor the class or whatever. I'm not asking for sponsorships, but people sponsor the class in somebody's memory, in somebody's honor. Okay, so that's a beautiful thing, and you'll see many classes throughout the Torah world that are sponsored. Is it okay to mention that person's name? Sometimes people want to be anonymous. That's one thing, but sometimes people who could have been anonymous want their name out there, not because they want pats on the back, but because they want others to say, "Oh, wait, if that person did it, maybe I'm doing better financially, and maybe I thought I cared more about Torah than this person. Look at that. I guess I don't care as much as I thought I did. Maybe I should sponsor the class sometime." So that's kind of the idea behind that, and that's a beautiful thing if that can be done again for good reason. Again, that's part of the reason why Lashon Hara has a lot of power, negative power in the world. It creates much machloket and arguments and a lack of cohesion in the Jewish people that we're so desperate for nowadays. So this Chatam Sofer is a very beautiful reminder, not only to stay away from speaking about others, but also not to spend too much time thinking about how great you are, because that's not going to lead to growth, by the way. I'm so great. I've done everything. I'm perfect. So yeah, if you think that, then you probably aren't, because there's everybody has what to grow on. And as somebody told me recently, you think you're so great? I said, no, I don't. But everybody has what to work on. As long as we're all working on what we need to be working on, that's what's going to improve the world. All right, let's keep going here. We've got quite a bit more to say. Chapter 39, verse 1. I'm going to read this verse, and it's going to sound like I'm reading about one thing, and then Rashi is going to throw the whole thing upside down, put it on its head. All right. So the part of the calculations had to do with min hatchelet ve'argaman v'tolat hashani asu bigdei sarad l'sharet bakodesh. The purple, blue, all these crimson different threads were used in making for the service of the Mishkan. For the service. Now, usually when we say the sharet, means for the Kohen service. And so the assumption usually is, without looking at Rashi, it would seem that we're talking about the bigdei kahuna, the clothing of the Kohen, as we were talking about before. Yasu et bigdei hakodesh, and they made the clothing of the Kodesh, asher la'aron asher tziva H-Shem et Moshe, and then they made the clothing for the Kohen as Hashem commanded Moshe. Says Rashi, wait a minute. We're saying the same thing twice. They brought it for the clothing to serve, and then they made the clothing to serve. The service clothing. They made the servant clothing. What is it? Which one is it? So he says like this: Min hatchelet vargaman, Makan ani omer. And this is why I said, and he said this earlier. Sorry, it says sheish lo nemar. It doesn't say sheish, so it doesn't say linen, even though the kahuna, the Kohen, wore linen, and here have all the other ingredients of the clothing of the Kohanim, except for this. So it doesn't say it here. Why not? Mikan and Yomer. This is why I said earlier in his commentary. I think back in verse 4, if I'm not mistaken. He says, this is not the clothing of the Kohen that we're talking about here. The second half of the verse is talking about the clothing of the Kohen. It says so very clearly. But the first half does not. The clothing of the Kohen included linen. This is the clothing, this is the covering that was used to cover the Mishkan b'shat siluk misaot, when they were traveling, to cover it from the elements, etc. Shelo haya bahem sheish, and those coverings that were over the Mishkan as they were carrying the Mishkan, those did not have linen. So that says Rashi, basically, all of this clothing talk isn't actually clothing, it's just the covering for the Mishkan. That's what Moshe finds in Zechet Tzaddik Levracha, Zchus Yagin Aleinu. He says, Amin Cheles Asu Bigdei Srad L'Sharet B'Kodesh, because he quotes Rashi, Pirash Bigdei Srad Einam Begadim Shal Kahuna. These are the coverings of the vessels, not the covering of the Kohen. Av Shenamru B'Chol Makom Bikra Echad. But either way, it looks like it's in one verse. What's the point? Why is it's a good question. If it's not the clothing of the Kohen, why does it seem like it is? It's certainly described the same way, and the other part of the verse seems to be talking about covering the Kohen. So why are we seemingly, why is Hashem and His Torah comparing the two? Venira, and he says, seems to me, Hatam shenamru biyacha lahorot ki gam bigdei kahuna hu rak l'chvod u'tiferet. They're written about together because just like the clothing of the Kohen is meant to bring him up in greatness and in beauty, ki begadim shenasu lichsot et dvar hamukdash. Just like something is used to cover up something that's holy. The covering of the Mishkan, Hashem wants us to associate with the covering of the Kohen, because the covering of the Mishkan is obviously for its protection from the elements and for its greatness. So we're not just going to schlep it like furniture across the desert. We're going to cover it up. We're going to beautify it. We're going to, just like when we have a mitzvah, like lulav and etrog, we don't just put the etrog. We don't throw the etrog in a shopping bag. There's special boxes for the etrog, beautiful decorative boxes, covers for the lulav. We want to make zekeli van vehu with this. Our mitzvot are decorated. We make them mahudar. We make them beautiful. So that's what we do with the Mishkan. Don't forget that that's also what we do with a person. That's also what we do with a person. A person is decorated. A person is dressed. A person is made to look the way they look for themselves. Not for an image, not for something else, but for their kavod, their tiferet. Ki hakohen be'ed shemishared be'avoda tzarich liyot b'madrega she'ein bo chisron u'pagam. When a Kohen serves in the Beit HaMikdash, in the Mishkan, the Kohen has to be flawless. has to be without any flaw, without any kind of impediment. Shebechol averav osa rak rotzon Hashem yitbarach. All of his limbs should want to serve Hashem. All of his limbs are perfect and in good health and ready to go. We talk about this in greater detail in other places. I should also mention that he's consistent with this idea, not only in this writing, but also in his halachic writing. In Igrot Moshe, famously, he talks about the situation of a person putting on tefillin and with tefillin going into the bathroom. It's not a problem of the tefillin, he says. Because when you put on your tefillin, when a man puts on tefillin, the man's body becomes more holy. And that body, that holy body, can't be in an unholy place. It's not that the tefillin are being placed in an unholy place. The body, the human being, who can be elevated to such a high level by doing the mitzvot of Hashem, that human being, that body cannot be now degraded. That's the lesson. That's the point. And before you say to what degree, what does this lead to? I'm glad you asked, because the last verse we're going to look at today, second to last. Let's see. We'll try to fit this in also. Yeah. Chapter 40, verse 16. Mem Tet Zayin. Finally, Moshe gets all of the things together. V'yas Moshe kechol asher tzivah Hashem oto kein asa, and Moshe did as Hashem commanded him, so did he do. And the Imrei Shefer, that's Rav Shlomo Kluger, points out that this seems very redundant. He did, and Moshe did everything Hashem told him to do. We've been saying that over and over and over again. V'yas Moshe kechol asher tzivah Hashem oto kein asa. Hina omro v'yas Moshe lechora hu ach lemutar. Obviously, he did what he was told to do. He didn't do anything Hashem didn't tell him to do. V'havi achar kach amar vayihika ke'echad lechodesh. And lama amar kan v'yas. Why is it saying he did? This is a beautiful idea. Achakavana nira kevan the kaimelan shoalim v'dorshim behilchot haPesach kodem lePesach shloshim yom. This is one of the sources. This isn't the source that's mentioned in Halacha, by the way, but it's another source of the idea that you should learn about the laws of Pesach 30 days before Pesach. In other words, what does it mean that Moshe did it? It means he taught it. He explained it. The Jewish people didn't know much about the Mishkan. He told them what to do, what to donate, and what materials and what sizes. But how to actually experience it, that had to be taught. And before it was even used, because there was quite a bit of time between when it was finally finished, right? When it was finished, and then finally started getting used in Nisan, right? With the what you call it, the 7 days before Nisan, when we had the inauguration of the Mishkan. So all of that took time. And V'yas Moshe means kechol asher tzivah Hashem oto kemo she'oto tziva Pesach shnei lamid yom kodem. Umemenu lamdu Chazal, and this is how the rabbis learn out this idea. Sheshol imedorshim lamid yom shaharei Moshe Rabbeinu omad bepesach rishon machzir al Pesach Sheni. So we have this concept of Pesach Sheni. So Pesach Sheni was taught to us 30 days before, all the way back in Pesach, the first Pesach, we were taught about the second Pesach, the makeup Pesach. So too here, Moshe had to teach the Jewish people how this was supposed to be used, because to really appreciate something, you need to be taught it. And learning about something is part of doing it. How are you going to keep Pesach if you don't learn about it? You're going to go into Pesach blind? You're going to ask the day before Pesach, how do we do this? What are we doing? You need time. You need a good month or so at least to learn some of the laws, to sort of begin to appreciate what a beautiful, amazing holiday is coming up. That's, by the way, a free plug to our Shabbat afternoon classes when I've been teaching the laws of Pesach all the way from 30 days before. We started learning the laws of Pesach back on Purim, Baruch H-Shem. And we're continuing this week with the laws of this unique Pesach, which we won't have again for another 20 years. So we'll see how this class ages by then. All right, so last part. So we just finished saying that this the preparation for a mitzvah, the sacrifice of a mitzvah we've been talking about, Shimon ben Chalafta, and how much he gave up to learn Torah, and that nobody else's reward could somehow substitute for his own, etc. And then we talked about just now, how great, how elevated a person can be by doing mitzvot. So based on all of that, let's look at the end of the parsha. The end of the parsha, the end of Sefer Shemot. Vayakam Moshe et HaMishkan. And Moshe set up the Mishkan. V'iten et Adanav. He put in the Vayasim et Krashav. He put in the sockets. He put in the boards. V'yiten et Bricha. V'yakam et Amudav. He put in the bars. He put up the posts. Right? He did everything. But did he? Did he really? We've had previous classes where we talked about, we quoted from the Sforno, whether he literally took it all apart and put it back together, or whether a miracle happened. The Midrash definitely seems to say, in Midrash Tanchuma, definitely says a miracle happened. So asks Rav Moshe Sternbach Shlita, should live and be well, in Tam Vedat, if it all happened by miracle, why is Moshe rewarded? Why is Moshe given credit? He didn't do it. A miracle did it. It's a miracle, right? No, it's not Moshe doing it. It was a miracle that did it. I am in Midrash Tanchuma. Look in the Midrash Tanchuma, where this is very clear. Sha'af Betzalel v'Haliyav lo yachlu lahakim et HaMishkan. These two amazing people weren't able to do it. Not Betzalel, not Haliyav. They weren't able to do it. Rak Moshe Rabbeinu b'neis hakim et HaMishkan. With a miracle, Moshe was able to put up the Mishkan all by himself, right? Even an Amish house needs the entire community to do it. Here, Moshe did it, seemingly all on his own. He lifted it up, and the whole thing went like a miniature pirate ship in a bottle. He made the whole thing happen, right? That's what the Midrash says. That's what it means. He put up the Mishkan. He did it himself. Kadosh Baruch Hu Amar LaMoshe Asuk biyadecha ata mare b'amidu. So Hashem told Moshe, you should see what I'm going to do. Hu omed me'elav, and he stood by him. V'ani kotev alecha she'ata hekmatu. So I'm going to write in the Torah that you put it up. You were just there, and a miracle, and I made the miracle happen. But I'll give you credit. Ayin Sham. That's all a quote from the Tanchuma. Says Rav Sternbach, Vayinu she'af shenasa b'neis v'hukam elav, since it was done by miracle. Mikol makom lo zachu l'neis zeh ela al yidei shehishtadlut Moshe mesirat nafsho v'chein karuim b'malacha al shemo. Because Moshe tried to do it and had Mesirat Nefesh, gave up his energy, worked hard to make this happen. He struggled for it. Just like Rav Shimon ben Chalafta, right? He struggled for it. He wanted to make sure this mitzvah happened. He was worried. He was anxious about it. He was making it happen, and he couldn't do it by himself. So a miracle did it. He still gets the credit for it in the Torah. As tolas l'shem shemayim. This is the great toelis l'shem shemayim. This is what it means to work for the sake of heaven. Sha'af hakadosh baruch hu ozer b'derech nes. Hashem always helps with a miracle. If you want to get something done, you might not be able to do it on your own, but you struggle and you try and you push, And when you push, Hashem will finish it off with a miracle, and it'll happen. That's the idea. Miko Mokom, Kevan, Sheishtadlu Lotu B'Mesirat Nafsho, us too. When we do that, just like Moshe did, when we struggle and we're earnestly trying our best to make something happen, Hevi Hanes Nachshav Lo, that miracle will happen and will be given in your credit, Ki'ilu Hu Osa Hadavar, as if you yourself made that happen, as if you yourself made it happen, as if there was no miracle at all. Miracle did it, but you get the credit because you were the one who pushed for it to happen. And that is one of the great messages of the Parsha that we've seen throughout these commentaries, all the way up from the bells and the pomegranates, wherever they were, and all the lessons there, all the way up to Moshe Rabbeinu concluding with the Mishkan, and the Mishkan now bringing the Shekhinah into the Jewish people, where the Shekhinah can now dwell amongst the holy Jewish people from that point and onward. Thank you for joining us for the class. Hope you have a great rest of your week. And if you have any questions, by all means, stick around and ask, or check it out on the YouTube channel, and you can ask questions there as well.